Sometimes a woman lives two completely different lives for 47 years and nobody notices, until the truth explodes in Dr. Phil's studio. Stop the tape. Stop it right now. Dr. Phil's voice cut through the studio like a knife. The cameras froze. The audience gasped. On the couch, a 65-year-old woman named Margaret sat trembling, a sealed envelope clutched in her shaking hands. What she was about to reveal would shatter everything her family thought they knew. But nobody, not the audience, not the crew, not even Dr. Phil himself, was prepared for what came next. 12 hours earlier, Margaret had arrived at the studio believing she was there to discuss family communication issues. That's what the producers had told her daughter Sarah, who had applied to the show months ago, desperate for help understanding why her mother had become so distant, so secretive. Sarah sat in the audience now, watching her mother on stage, completely unaware that in less than 20 minutes, her entire understanding of her family would collapse. Dr. Phil had started the segment normally, with his characteristic directness. Margaret, your daughter says you've been keeping secrets. She says there are phone calls you won't take in front of the family, trips you take without explanation. Talk to me about what's going on. Margaret had rehearsed her answers. She would talk about needing space, about privacy, about how adult children don't understand boundaries. Standard stuff. Safe stuff. But then Dr. Phil did what he always does. He looked past the rehearsed answers and saw the truth trembling beneath the surface. Margaret, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. With your daughter. With yourself. The studio went completely silent. Even the camera operators stopped adjusting their equipment. How long have you been living a double life? The question hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Margaret's face strained of color. Her hands started shaking. The envelope she'd been holding, the one the producers had asked her to bring, the one she thought would never be opened, suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I don't know what you mean, Margaret whispered, but her voice betrayed her. Dr. Phil leaned forward. His expression wasn't angry. It was something far more powerful. It was understanding mixed with absolute determination to get to the truth. Margaret, I've been doing this for 21 years. I can see when someone is carrying a secret so big it's destroying them from the inside. That envelope you're holding, what's in it? What happened next would become one of the most talked about moments in Dr. Phil history. Margaret's hands trembled violently. Tears started streaming down her face. In the audience, her daughter Sarah stood up, confusion and fear written across her face. Mom? What's going on? Dr. Phil raised his hand gently towards Sarah. Sarah, I need you to sit down for a moment. Your mom is about to tell us something very important, and she needs to do this her way. Then Dr. Phil did something unprecedented. He stood up, walked over to Margaret, and sat down right next to her on the couch. Not across from her in his power position. Next to her. As a human being, not as a host. Margaret, whatever is in that envelope, whatever you've been hiding, it's time. You've been carrying this alone for too long. Let me help you carry it. The camera caught everything. Margaret's tears, her shaking hands, the way she looked at the envelope like it contained her entire soul. And then she spoke. I have another family. The studio erupted. Not in noise, but in collective shock so profound you could feel it physically. Sarah's face went white. The audience members gasped. Even the camera crew, who had seen everything over the years, exchanged stunned glances. Dr. Phil's expression didn't change. He simply nodded and said, "Keep going." For 47 years, Margaret continued, her voice breaking, I've been living two separate lives. I have a husband here in California, that's Sarah's father, David. We've been married for 48 years. She paused, struggling to breathe. But I also have a husband in Arizona. His name is Robert. We've been married for 47 years. And we have 3 children together. The silence that followed was deafening. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Dr. Phil's face showed something rarely seen on television, genuine shock. But he recovered quickly, his professional training taking over. Hold on. Hold on just a moment. He turned to the control room. Stop rolling. I need to talk to production. The studio lights stayed on, but the recording stopped. Dr. Phil walked off stage, and for 3 minutes, the audience sat in stunned silence while Margaret sobbed quietly on the couch and Sarah sat frozen in her seat, unable to process what she just heard. When Dr. Phil returned, his expression had changed. This was no longer just a television show. This was an intervention, a confession, and a family in free fall, all happening simultaneously. Margaret, before we continue, I need to know, do both families know you're here today? Margaret shook her head. Robert thinks I'm visiting my sister in San Diego. He has no idea this show exists. My children in Arizona, they don't know about Sarah. They don't know about David. They don't know about this entire life. Dr. Phil sat down slowly. And the envelope? Off camera, Dr. Phil made a choice no producer expected. Margaret held up the envelope with shaking hands. This contains letters. 47 years of letters. Letters I've written but never sent. To both families. Explaining everything. Apologizing for everything. Dr. Phil took the envelope gently. May I? Margaret nodded, unable to speak. Dr. Phil opened the envelope and pulled out hundreds of handwritten pages. Letters dated from 1978 to 2024. Letters that started with, Dear David and Sarah, and others that started with, Dear Robert and my Arizona family. Letters explaining how it started, how it continued, how the guilt had eaten her alive for nearly 5 decades. He read one aloud, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. I never meant for it to happen. I met David in college. We fell in love. We got married. But then I got a job opportunity in Arizona, and I met Robert. I told myself I would end it. I told myself every day for 47 years that I would end it. But I couldn't. I loved them both. I built families with both. And every single day of my life has been a lie. But what happened next is something no one in the room, or watching at home, saw coming. Dr. Phil set the letters down carefully. Then he did something he rarely does on camera. He got emotional. Margaret, do you understand what you've done? Not just to yourself, but to these people you say you love? Margaret nodded through her tears. I know. I know I'm a monster. No. Dr. Phil's voice was firm. You're not a monster. You're a human being who made a choice 47 years ago and then got trapped in it. But Margaret, you can't undo 47 years. You can't make this right. But you can stop making it worse. He turned to the audience. Sarah, I know this is devastating. But your mother came here today because she couldn't carry this secret anymore. That envelope, she brought it because she wants to stop lying. Sarah stood up, tears streaming down her face. How could you? How could you do this to Dad? To me? Come up here, Dr. Phil said gently. Come talk to your mom. Sarah walked onto the stage, her legs barely supporting her. She stood in front of her mother, and for a long moment either of them spoke. Then Sarah said the words that broke everyone in the studio. Who am I? If half my life was a lie, who am I? Margaret looked at her daughter, and for the first time in 47 years, she told the complete truth. You are the daughter I loved every single day of your life. Everything I did with you was real. My love for you was never a lie. The only lie was me. I lied about who I was. But you, Sarah, you were always real. Dr. Phil stood up. We're going to take a break. But before we do, I need to say something to everyone watching at home and everyone in this studio. He looked directly into the camera. This is not a story about good versus evil. This is a story about choices and consequences. Margaret made a choice 47 years ago, and then she made that same choice every single day for nearly half a century. And now, 2 families are going to have to deal with the consequences of those choices. He turned back to Margaret. After this show, you and I are going to sit down with the team. We're going to contact Robert. We're going to set up family counseling for both families. This doesn't end today. This is where the real work begins." Margaret nodded, unable to speak. The envelope sat on the table between them, a symbol of 47 years of secrets, finally exposed to the light. When they returned from break, Dr. Phil had made arrangements for family therapists to work with both families. He had contacted legal experts to discuss the implications of bigamy. He had arranged for Margaret to have separate counseling sessions to address the psychological complexity of maintaining two lives for nearly 5 decades. But more importantly, he had done something that only Dr. Phil could do. He had turned a moment of devastating revelation into a starting point for healing. "Margaret, you can't change the past. But you get to decide what happens next. You can continue lying, or you can face the consequences of your choices with courage and honesty." "I want to tell the truth," Margaret said, her voice stronger now. "All of it. To everyone." Dr. Phil nodded. "Then that's what we're going to help you do. Not on television. Not for ratings. But in private, with therapists, with mediators, with the support you're going to need." He turned to Sarah. "And Sarah, you're going to need support too. Finding out your entire family history is different than you thought. That's traumatic. We're setting you up with a therapist who specializes in family trauma." Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. The show ended with Margaret and Sarah sitting together on the couch, not hugging, not reconciled, but together. The envelope of letters sat between them, no longer a secret, but a starting point for difficult conversations that would take years to work through. Dr. Phil's final words to the audience captured everything. "Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. Sometimes the truth is just the beginning of the hardest work you'll ever do. But it's better than living a lie." 6 months later, the aftermath was still unfolding. Dr. Phil had stayed involved, checking in with both families through the therapeutic team. Margaret had told Robert everything. The Arizona family was devastated. Divorce proceedings had begun from both husbands. The 3 children in Arizona wanted nothing to do with their mother. Sarah was in intensive therapy, trying to reconcile her memories of childhood with the truth of her mother's double life. But something else had happened too. Margaret had stopped lying. For the first time in 47 years, she woke up every morning as one person, not 2. The relief, she told her therapist, was almost as powerful as the guilt. "I destroyed 2 families," she had said in a follow-up session. "But I also freed them from a lie. They deserve to live in the truth, even if the truth is painful." The envelope of letters was never published, never read on television, never exploited for drama. Instead, Dr. Phil had helped Margaret use those letters in family therapy sessions. Carefully, privately, with professional guidance. Some letters were read aloud in counseling. Others were kept private. But they served their purpose. They showed both families that Margaret had been aware of her deception, had struggled with it, and ultimately could no longer sustain it. Dr. Phil had said it best in his final conversation with Margaret, off camera. "You didn't come here for forgiveness. You came here because you couldn't live with yourself anymore. That's the first step toward becoming the person you need to be." The legacy of that episode was profound. It sparked national conversations about the psychology of deception, the nature of identity, and the long-term consequences of living a lie. Mental health professionals used it as a case study in understanding how people compartmentalize their lives. Family therapists referenced it when working with clients dealing with betrayal and broken trust. But perhaps most importantly, it reminded millions of viewers that Dr. Phil's show wasn't just about entertainment. It was about real people, real pain, and real consequences. It was about using the platform of television to facilitate healing, even when that healing was messy, incomplete, and painful. Margaret's story didn't have a happy ending, but it had an honest one. And sometimes, that's the only ending that matters. The envelope remained in Dr. Phil's office, a reminder that some secrets are too heavy to carry alone, and that the truth, no matter how devastating, is always better than a lie. Years later, Dr. Phil reflected on that episode in an interview. "People ask me what the most difficult episode I've ever filmed was," he said. Margaret's story is always at the top. Not because it was sensational, but because it was so human. She wasn't evil. She was trapped in a choice she made when she was 18 years old, and every day after that, the lie got bigger until it consumed her entire existence. He paused, remembering that day in the studio. When she opened that envelope, she wasn't just revealing a secret. She was revealing her entire soul. Every letter in there was a confession she'd written but never had the courage to send. For 47 years, she documented her own deception. That's not the behavior of a sociopath. That's the behavior of someone in profound psychological pain. The therapeutic community praised the episode as a masterclass in crisis intervention. Dr. Phil had managed to balance the entertainment value of dramatic revelation with genuine therapeutic intervention. He hadn't exploited Margaret's pain for ratings. He had used the platform to get her the help she desperately needed. That's the whole point, Dr. Phil later explained. Television can be a tool for good if you use it responsibly. Margaret came to that studio because she knew she needed help, and she knew doing it publicly would force her to follow through. She couldn't back out. She couldn't keep lying. The cameras held her accountable,